Hello, welcome to Restoring Tradition. This is Judith Sharp. It's August 1st, 2026. And what a treat it is to have someone totally new to ISOC join us today. This is really fun. I'm so excited. But first, the friendly reminder, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Push the buttons, please. Now, to our guest, Mr. Ademar Rakowsky is a specialist in geology who works with Hugh Owen, director of the Colby Center, and we certainly all know the Colby Center. Hugh has interviewed with us in the past, attended a couple of our ISOC conferences as well. Now, Ademar has titled his visit with us, Geologic Evidence for the Great Flood. I don't know about you, but I'm excited about this. Ademar, hello, welcome to ISOC.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
And the same to you. And I'm going to be really unhappy because guess what? We forgot to say a Hail Mary again. And usually I always start with everybody saying, you want to do it?
I was going to open it up with I'm Byzantine Catholic. I was going to open up with the Byzantine prayer to the Holy Spirit.
Well, that would be wonderful. Go right ahead.
Okay, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, who is everywhere present and fills all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and make your home within us, cleanse us of all corruption, and save, O gracious one, our souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
And seed of wisdom, Our Lady, pray for us.
Pray for us.
Okay. All right. Now, listen, you have all kinds of stuff you want to talk about. First of all, I think you better tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, I'm in my 60s already. I'm the kid of World War II refugees from Ukraine, the third wave, fleeing the Soviets and Hitler. And it was just, a very tragic time. And I grew up, I was born like 17 years after the war was over, but I might as well have been there because of all the stories I heard. My grandparents lived with us and other grandparents in New York. I grew up in Philly and just back and forth. And then huge communities in both cities that were Ukrainian and everybody remembering everything. Because a lot of them went right through it. So basically, I grew up bilingual, bicultural, and because I'm the kind that I don't enjoy schizophrenia. I need to integrate everything into a unit. So I basically took elements of both cultures and adapted them to the gospel, because really that should be the ultimate standard. And so that taught me to think outside the box a lot, question narratives, both on the American and the Ukrainian side, and to kind of basically think for myself. And I owe a lot of that independent thinking also to my father, God rest his soul, Ademar Rakowsky. If, in your charity, you could pray for his soul. Okay, and to sum up, my mentality, and this is how I often introduce myself in terms of my outlook. Even though I grew up in America, my mentality is not American. I'm old world, traditional, Eastern European Catholic, medieval peasant, early Genexer. That's quite a mouthful. Yeah, old world, traditional Eastern European Catholic, medieval peasant, early Genexer. So I have a deeply ingrained faith and the sensus Catholicus that dates at least to the times of St. Josaphat in the early 1600s, if not earlier. Because we were a subculture when I was growing up, people had just come over a decade before I was born, roughly. We were, as a group of Eastern Catholics, we were not affected by the Protestant revolt. So that wasn't in our thinking. Vatican II hadn't really happened until after I was born, or during my, I was born in the middle of it. So same thing, we weren't affected by that initially. And also we were not affected by Americanism, which I think is the scourge of American Catholics in America, because the multi-century compromise, people refusing to embrace martyrdom, they're fleeing martyrdom to have a comfortable life here, instead of confronting the Masonic and Protestant majority in this country and trying to convert them. So it was basically go along to get along. And so we have a lot of being Catholic is just going to church and nothing else. Being nice to people, but not challenging what they believe in. It's kind of live and let live type thing. I apologize for the wobbliness of my image because I'm doing a handheld cell phone here.
Oh, hey, they make stuff where you can put the cell phone down on it and have it right in front of you. I'm going to get one of those because that way we wouldn't have the wobbling. That's all right, as long as we can see your face, and it's perfect now. But
Okay, so I'm going to be turning to notes periodically. So
say that again.
I'm going to be turning to notes periodically. So if you see my eyes moving, that's why.
No problem.
Now, being a semi-retired educator, I always give homework, and teacher's motto: no assignment too big, no grade too small, and also so people don't think, oh well, Ademar said it, therefore it's true. I don't want people thinking that. I want to point a direction, point you in the direction, and then y'all can go look it up on your own, and so you know that it wasn't just me saying so. Okay, so first off, some fundamental concepts. Data set. When you're doing any investigation about anything, you need to have a data set that's observations or simple principles or something, so that you can interpret what you're looking at, or kind of have an idea of what you're looking at. So data set, and then the other thing is paradigm. That's your interpretive framework. So data set, paradigm. Data set would be something equivalent or analogous to the zeros and ones you have in your computer, and then the paradigm would be the software that makes sense of everything. Okay, so that's what's going on with that. Now there are, I'm going to try to highlight things, so if anybody's taking notes during this, they can easily do that. Okay, so first off, there are two errors that creep into any science, whether it's natural science, theology, the queen of the sciences. And the two errors are, first one, credentialism. So you assume that because somebody has credentials that they're speaking, what they're saying is more superior to somebody who doesn't have those credentials. Big problem. I mean, and the other one is temporal snobbery, which is that assumption that we are superior in development to the people that came before us, and therefore, for example, Genesis is mythological because the people back then were so primitive they wouldn't understand, and God had to use primitive imagery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's also a lot of nonsense as well. Okay, so with that said, I'm primarily going to do the natural science evidence for the Great Flood, but I'll just mention two sources that people can look up on their own. The first one is, it's actually a source of data: sacred scripture and sacred tradition. You can look up all the Bible quotes, multiple translations that mention the Great Flood, mention Noah, lots of places, Old Testament, New Testament. Okay, that's outside my purview here, but so that's, people can follow up on that. Same thing with tradition, church fathers. You could easily look that up online. Okay, now, so that's one important set of evidence, a major set. Divine revelation has been poo-pooed or just disregarded as being irrelevant, partly because of credentialism and temporal snobbery, but also, a philosophical and a religious bias or atheist bias against the truth of divine revelation. The other one, and this will be the historical flood illustration, cultural evidences. Okay. So that's that one that has, it looks like a graph with little green squares and triangles and things. I don't know if your production manager has it up yet.
Yeah, would you like that up?
Yeah. There we go. So essentially, you look at various peoples all over the world, even as far away as the Caribbean, Polynesia. They all have a Great Flood account. The ones that were generally closest to the Middle East, to Mount Ararat, they have the most elements of the scriptural account, and but those that are further away have less, but you still have essential elements there. And I invite people to look that up. I'm pretty sure that is in Walt Brown's book, creationscience.com. He got it from another source, I'm pretty sure, but you can look that up online. I forgot I apologize, I forgot the actual reference, but
okay. So can I interrupt you for a second? I just want to make sure that I'm very poor at all these things, but okay. So all the little green squares mean that there's full representation of the biblical idea. In case somebody's listening and they're not being able to see the graph or whatever you want to call it, I think this is really good to go over because it starts out with what is that? The Babylonia 1 and Babylon 2, and there's all kinds of full representation there of the biblical idea. And then Persia, good. So who's the next one that's
then you got Syria, Asia Minor, Greece, Egypt, Italy.
Yeah.
I can hardly see the little letters there, but
okay. But even India and let's see, Fiji Islands, Hawaii. There's even, oh my, that's really fascinating. And then there's
Fiji is Melanesia and Hawaii is Polynesia. So even people that far removed from the Middle East, from Mount Ararat, have elements of the flood.
Yeah, and of course, there's even partial representation in different places. But I was noticing even Mexico. I mean, this is really fascinating graph here. I really like it. A lot of India. I mean, it's almost everywhere. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, and now I apologize for not looking up the. I should have looked up the reference because I got this off one of my presentations from the PowerPoint that I use. And but the point is that it's. I'm pretty sure it's from creationscience.com. It has a free online book written by Walt Brown about the hydroplate theory, but he goes into other aspects of the Great Flood, including the scriptural ones and cultural, to show that there's evidence, plenty of evidence that the Great Flood actually happened. His book presents a theory of the mechanism or mechanisms that were involved in it, which I'm going to go over a little bit. But the point is that you can get the book for free. You have to register online with a moniker and the password. But and I think the hard copy is coming out pretty soon. Of the latest edition. You can get older editions online. The one that I really liked was the 8th edition. That may still be available online, hardbacked. And so, yeah.
Okay,
and
well,
then,
let me interrupt you again one time, because on this graph you also have all the notations from Genesis. Genesis 6:5-6, blah blah blah. Favorite family. I mean, so there's a whole lot from this. So if people are not seeing this, I think it would be good if you would go back to the podcast, if you're just doing it on MP3 or something, to look at this, because it's really fascinating. I'll tell you, universal destruction, Genesis 7:21-23, and there's a lot of references there. So this is really a very interesting graphic, and I thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm grateful to whoever came up with this, and I don't know if I think Walt Brown actually borrowed it from another website, but the point is that God bless whoever put that together, because
you bet.
Yeah, I really need to follow up on this, and I'll probably email you the actual reference so you can put it in the show notes later.
Okay, you can put it in the comment area.
Yeah. I can put. Yeah, I don't know how to pin a comment, but
we can figure it out.
Okay. So anyway, so that's a major data set also, and then the other thing, and this is a common sense, and people forget that why would Noah? Because some people say, oh, it was just a local flood. The Black Sea got flooded by the Mediterranean and all that stuff. But why would you have 100 years of building an ark for a local flood?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty insane. And then the other thing is, if it's a local flood, then God is a liar, because our Lord talks about it and all that. And the other thing, and this is obviously not as common sense, but the word that was used for the flood in the Greek text of the Old Testament is kataklysmos, which means cataclysm, which means a total overturning. It's not a catastrophe. Catastrophe just means a flood where you're submerged or the currents carrying stuff away. But a cataclysm it literally means an overturning. So The world is overturned. And when you look at the geology, when I get into the hydroplate theory, you'll see that things literally were overturned in many cases and pulverized. And the more geology I do of this, the more horrific the event is in my eyes, because I'm seeing the hard evidence of what happened. Okay, so that's the non-natural science data. Now I'm actually going to go into the physical data,
Okay.
and I divvied that up into 16 categories. So whoever's taking notes, I'll be numbering them verbally. Some of them I'll be spending more time on, some less. Okay, so first one is out of the 16 is mega sequences. Mega sequences, like sequence plural mega. These are actually collections of different rock formations that have the same order on various continents in the world, which indicates that they were all deposited roughly contemporaneously. And then you have about six or half a dozen of them at least, and they all have the same order. So I forget their names, but the lowest sequence has a particular order of sediments in there. Sedimentary rock obviously is stuff made out of particles, mud, sand, gravel, limestone, that kind of stuff. And so it's the same sequence, and then you have another sequence on top of that that has a different configuration, but again, it's consistent over the continents, and it just goes on and on up. And so that indicates that something worldwide happened. Okay.
Now, excuse
Number
me,
two,
is that the layers you're talking about? Layers of sedimentary rock or something?
I would say large collections of layers. So let's say you have hundreds and hundreds of these layers, and they all have approximately the same sequence, whether you're in South America or Asia or North America or Australia or wherever. They all have almost um, identical sequence or order.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Wonderful. Okay.
yeah, if you considered each particular rock type as a letter, it would be spelling the same word vertically, no matter what continent you go to. In some
Okay.
continents, it's missing, and then you have another sequence with a different set of letters, like a second word, and then you have a third one. There's about half a dozen of them, and so if everything were like random or old Earth or whatever, you wouldn't have that, because this indicates contemporaneity. This stuff happened all at the same time or very close together
Wow.
in time. So that's
Fascinating.
the first point. The second one, number two, is sudden death of creatures. Sudden death of creatures, and I would add being buried whole, WHOLE, buried in one piece. Normally, when you have bivalves, clams and other shellfish, mussels or whatever, when they die, the muscle that holds the shells together doesn't contract anymore, and the thing opens. And so you can tell when something's died. You can see it in the supermarket too. You don't buy open clams or open mussels because they're dead, so they're spoiled most likely. And so you have a lot of them buried intact, so they were buried alive. Also, you have creatures like dinosaurs and others that are buried as a unit, sometimes in huge graveyards. You can like visit Dinosaur National Monument in Colorado and eastern Utah, places like that. I mean, that's not the only place. There are multiple graveyards. There's actually one right outside DC in Laurel, along Route One. As soon as you leave the Beltway Northeast, it's I don't know in what condition the bones are in, or if the skeletons are complete or not. But they actually have a dig, I think, once a month for outsiders, and then they do research on that the rest of the rest of the month. But so you have these graveyards, and typically when something dies, it decays and gets scavenged to pieces. So the fact that we have so many skeletons all over the place that are complete indicates that they were suddenly buried, and a lot of them indicate they're arched back. When the reptile dies, it arches back because it's in agony. So they get buried in that position too. So that indicates something's going on. Something very sudden, very quick burying happened, because you wouldn't have the creature in one piece, the carcass of it rather, if there were no sudden burial. The scavenging would happen too quickly. Um, Third thing, you have marine fossils on top of mountains. You find sea creature fossils up on top of Mount Everest and in the Alps, places like that. Maybe not at the very summit of Everest, but high up. How did these things get up there? Okay, so it's quite a distance.
Yeah.
Fourth thing,
Are you saying? Let me go back again. You're saying sea creatures in Mount Everest?
Yeah, in the rocks on the slopes of Mount Everest. You have them high up in the Alps. You have them in the Appalachian Mountains, which are closer to me. You have them high altitude, like not as high as the Alps or the Himalayas, but they're still a couple of thousand feet above sea level.
Wow,
So
interesting.
how do you get brachiopods or clams or anything else up that high?
Okay.
So that's something to ponder. How did that happen? Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, this is on more on a regional, local level, extensive flat layers, strata. I have a hiking place down the hill from where I live, and the layers there are horizontal. They occasionally have little faults in them or whatever, but they're horizontal. If I drive 100 miles east, actually like 150 miles east to Pennsylvania, I'm gonna have the same horizontal layering until I get to the buckling of the Allegheny Mountains. If I go west, because I'm off I-70, if I go west, I'll be in horizontal strata all the way to central Colorado. How do things like that get deposited? And not only that, if you look at these strata, and people say, oh, it's beach deposits or streams or whatever, there's a remarkable flatness to everything. I mean, the type of rock changes over distance, but you don't really have little stream channels wrinkling up the contacts between the layers. And you keep going and going, and you go to the Badlands. Western Kansas has Badlands, believe it or not just the Dakotas, but Western Kansas, because that would be where I-70 goes. And then eastern Colorado, you're in the plains already, still in the plains, but at that point, you have a sediment apron off of the Rockies that would cover up the original layering. But the point is that you have horizontality for vast distances. I mean, that's not natural by our modern processes that we see now. We don't have that kind of deposition happening on such a large scale. So that's puzzling. The other one is near you. If you go 70 westbound from Baltimore, Sidling Hill. It's a famous road cut. The mountain actually has a whole series of layers that are folded like a big U. And they're the actual visitor center. I forget which direction you have to go on to get there, but then just go to the next exit and come around if it's not on your side. But the point is that how do you fold stuff like that? Because if you fold anything, rock is brittle. How could you fold all that rock without it cracking and basically turning into a shattered? So what's going on there? Okay, so folded strata, that's number 5. So 1, mega sequences. 2, sudden death of creatures. 3, mountaintop marine fossils. 4, extensive flat strata locally. Oh, and the flat strata for number 4, I forgot to add. You see that when you go out to Montana. I was out in Montana twice already in the past few years. Horizontal layers in the east part of the state everywhere. They're called rim rocks, basically like the edge of a plateau. But I mean, it goes for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. It's like, how do you do that? As a matter of fact, Billings, Montana's airport is on top of a rim rock. So you're basically taking off over the city. And so you have these horizontal layers that the city sits on and the airport's on the plateau above it. So, and then 5 is folded strata. Now, number 6, planation surfaces, Planation, planation surfaces. There are continents like Australia and Africa, which are very flat. People don't really think of them as flat, but when you look at Australia, that's the flattest continent in the world. It's only got a dividing range on the east coast. It's got Mount Kosciuszko, which is 7,000 feet high, which by American standards is like a large hill.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, and but most of the continent is flat. You have like the McDonald ranges by Alice Springs or whatever, but they only go up like 1,000 or 2,000 feet. So that, I mean, on the broad scale of things, the little bumps. and then you got the Kimberley Plateau and everything in the northwest, and you got some low mountains, like maybe up to 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet in Western Australia, like the Bunbury area, and where they have the wine country. But the point is that the continent's largely flat. So how does that how did that develop? When you look at most places where you have erosion and rainfall and everything, you would have a very buckled looking or very irregular looking landscape, and you don't have that. And the same thing with Africa, except for the highlands around Morocco and Algeria, the Atlas Mountains, and then you have a bump called the Tibesti Highlands, and you have the Drakensberg Range in the southern part of South Africa. But most of the continent is just a giant plateau, different elevations, but still it's flat. And you will have the Rift Valley in the east, which has volcanoes like Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, and all connected with it. And then you'll have you'll have those mountains, but most of the continent, like the Congo jungle and everything, it's a sort of highland that's mostly level. And a lot of African capitals and major cities they're high up. They're a couple of thousand feet or higher, which means they have milder climates for their tropical latitude or subtropical. So Africa is another example. I mean, you look at South America, North America, very different. Eastern Asia, very different, thrust up into mountains. But Africa and Australia are just remarkably flat. So planation surfaces, number 6. Number 7, planation of mountains. This is really evident with the Appalachian Mountains. You go to Harrisburg, PA, you go to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland in Canada, you have all these parallel ridges that are all roughly the same height. So the strata there are folded and buckled and everything, but all these mountains they're low mountains. They're only going up to 2,000-3,000 feet, but their height largely is uniform, with an occasional knob here or there, but it's uniform. So how did that happen?
Question.
Yeah.
Maybe? Okay, so you're saying that there's like a little folding, or there's a little change. Is that from earthquakes?
No, that would actually be from the sliding at the end of the flood underwater. North America slid to the west, and the buckling happened during that. And I'll be explaining that when I get to the hydroplate theory.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So all the stuff was basically, the strata were soft, kind of like cookie dough, or maybe really set pudding, but not rock hard. That's why you could fold everything. But the point is that the puzzling thing is, since we're still looking at observations, how are these things so uniformly high? You got valleys in between, but the heights are pretty much the same everywhere. And even in, I think it's Nova Scotia or Newfoundland, the tops of the mountains there, they're clean. You have some rocks there that are broken up by frost, but it's almost like something like swept the mountaintops clean of anything that was on there. So and there's a reason behind that, which I'll get to in a little bit later. Okay, so that was number 7. Then we go to number 8, and I'll start with the limestone. Earth has a vast amount of limestone. And limestone is calcium carbonate, CaCO3, calcium, carbon, 3 oxygens. Okay, so limestone contains a huge amount of carbon. Now, if you take all the limestone in the world that is non-biological, and or most of it is non-biological, it's not produced by sea creatures, and then you combine it with all the carbon everywhere else, whether it's the ocean, the air, coal, plants, animals, the limestone carbon is 1,000 times greater than anything, all the rest put together, more than 1,000 times greater. So the question is, we don't have enough sea creatures, even over a vast amount of time, to produce that much. And also, where did that carbon initially come from for them to deposit it? So it must have come from a source other than biology. Okay, so the other thing is we have dolomite, Dolomite. Now, in the case of dolomite, it's not calcium carbonate, it's calcium and magnesium carbonate. So kind of magnesium and calcium sharing the load with the carbonate ion. And the question is, no creature produces that kind of shell. So the magnesium must have come from somewhere else. And then there's theories that you had, solutions of magnesium-rich water seeping up from volcanoes or something. But the problem is that these strata are so uniformly magnesiumized that they could not have been just formed by that way. So they must have come from somewhere, but they wouldn't have come, by the processes that people theorize now, and definitely not biologically. And then the other two things that are puzzling in huge numbers is large deposits of gypsum, like White Sands National Monument. But I mean, that's not the only place. There's multiple places all over where you have that's calcium sulfate, CaSO4. So sulfur and four oxygens and calcium. That's the stuff that you use for what, not fiberboard? What's the drywall or plaster?
Oh, yeah.
It's very soft and. Yeah, one of my friends actually learned the hard way. He was climbing out of a sinkhole in the gypsum cave in New Mexico, and he fell and broke both legs because it's very crumbly stuff, unlike limestone, and or at least a lot more crumbly. It's because softer. But the point is, it's theorized that gypsum develops from evaporation of seawater, or very concentrated seawater, like in an isolated body of water. But the fact is, we have so much of it all over the place. Where did it come from, and how did so much of it accumulate? And then the other one is salt, NaCl, sodium chloride. I mean, it's called an evaporite because it's believed to come from evaporation, but the deposits are so huge that normal evaporation could not produce it. And we really don't have many areas in the world where it's happening. I mean, you have salt pans in the Caribbean and in the San Francisco Bay Area, but that's artificial, man-made ponds. But really, you only have a few natural areas, like around the Arabian Peninsula, where the stuff's evaporating and you're depositing salt naturally. So where did that come from? So that's number 8. That's a very big puzzle. So it's the puzzle of limestone, vast limestone, VAST, dolomite, DOLOMITE, gypsum, I think everybody can spell that, and salt. Okay, so that's number 8. Number 9, and this is again one that you can see that most likely even where you live. Oversized valleys and canyons. So you have a little stream inside a very big valley. Where did that come from? You would expect if things were crumbling down the side of a mountain in many valleys. I mean, you do have stuff sliding off the hillsides and the smaller ones, great. But you have a lot of valleys that don't have that, where you have very little stuff off the surrounding highlands forming piles of sediment right above the stream. How'd that happen? Where did that stream dig? How did it dig out that big valley? Same thing like Grand Canyon. There is.
Oh, I want to hear about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Grand Canyon, you go to the bottom. I mean, you have the rock formations going all the way down to almost to the river. You have a little bit of sediment and crumbled rock around the Colorado River itself. But given how much it dug out, you should have a lot of crumbly stuff forming like hillsides or slopes above the river, but it's not there. And the Colorado River is small. It's roughly the size of the Hudson River in New York City. I mean, so it's not a vast body of water. It's not the Amazon or the Nile. So how did it dig something down that much? So, and also a lot of these ridges, you have water gaps. A famous one is Delaware Water Gap in where the Delaware River cuts through northeast Pennsylvania and northwest New Jersey. You have a ridge that's cut right through. Harrisburg, PA. It's the same ridge as actually going 150 miles roughly to the southwest. Same thing. You also have wind gaps. You have a ridge, and all of a sudden it's got a pretty deep valley with no stream in it. Where did that come from?
Oh my!
Where's the debris that the stream washed out? Because I mean, if streams are that small, they should have a lot of debris that they're not capable of carrying, like on the sides, and it's not there. Small amounts maybe, but that's it. So. Okay, so that's 9. So again, 6 planation surfaces, 7 planation of mountains, 8 the puzzle of vast limestone / dolomite, gypsum, and salt. The vast goes with the limestone, dolomite, gypsum, and salt. Not so much, but there's a lot of them around. And then 9 is oversized valleys. So 8 was the vast limestone, etc. 9 is the oversized valleys, and then you got the water gaps. And number 10, we'll be needing the next pictures. That's from that would be the what's the Cajon Pass pictures. There should be 2 of them for your production manager. Okay, and yep, those exactly. Okay, let's focus on that one first. Now, when you go to the beach, I grew up going to the beach in New Jersey. I grew up in Philly. You make a sand castle with wet, kind of runny sand. When you make a sufficient pile, the water runs out of the sand and leaves little drainage holes, like little pock marks. Well, you look at that. That's Cajon Pass area in Southern California, north of San Bernardino. That is full of those drainage holes. I mean, we don't really have large woodpeckers that can make that, especially in rock. And there probably aren't any critters in there for them to hunt anyway, if they could peck rock like that. Now, what you see there for scale is you see all that shrubbery, the wild growing on there. So if you could show the other picture, that is a further out shot. Yeah, like that. That'll give you an idea of scale. So that's chaparral you're looking at, Southern California type vegetation. So those bushes are maybe 3-4 feet high. So the thing is full of pock marks. And then a very famous iconic rock that Australia is famous for, Uluru or Ayers Rock. It's that big reddish monolith of stone. It's got a lot of drainage holes. You know, folks who are listening or watching, look it up. Ayers, Ayers, or Uluru, which is Uluru. That's the Aboriginal name. Either one, and start looking close-ups. You'll see that there are a lot of those drainage holes in there. Where did they come from? Okay. Okay, next, number 11. This one I'm going to spend a little bit of time on because this is something near and dear to my heart because I'm involved in this. Human footprints in dinosaur age rock. Human footprints in dinosaur age rock.
Okay.
And so I'll ask the production manager to bring up Alvis Delk. There we go. That is limestone. I've looked at the rock myself. I've probed it with my fingers. They've done CT scans, spiral CTs on it. You see pressure in the mineral crystals under the toes of the dinosaur footprint and under the toes of the human being. So apparently the human being stepped on the soft limestone mud, and then the dinosaur stepped on it a little bit later. And you can see the push-ups where the mud gets pushed up between the toes. You can see it especially in the middle toe of the dinosaur pushed up the mud into the arch. Actually, not into the arch, the opposite side of the foot from the arch. That's a right foot. Okay, that rock is from a tributary of the Paluxy River, Paluxy, Paluxy, Glen Rose, Texas, Glen, like Scottish Glen Rose, like the flower. Okay, it's about roughly 80 miles southwest by road from Dallas Fort Worth Airport. It's out in the countryside, very pretty countryside, I might add, very scrubby, cactus, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, that rock is Cretaceous age, lower Cretaceous. That's early Cretaceous. You have the three ages of the dinosaurs according to the evolution paradigm, and you have the Triassic, then the Jurassic, like the movie, and then you've got the Cretaceous. And then after that, you have the Quaternary, or Tertiary and Quaternary. That would be like, they consider that's when the mammals started dominating, and then human beings way at the end of it. But so this is a rock that's officially considered part of dinosaur age. And right nearby, the Paluxy River flows through Dinosaur Valley State Park, where there are numerous prints that you can come and see. And then the Creation Evidence Museum of Texas, Creation Evidence, I think it's .org or .com. You'd have to look it up. Creation Evidence. They have these and other footprints in their museum. And Like I said, I had them take the case off, and I probed it with my fingers, photographed the sides of it. It's essentially kind of like a limestone, sand, and mud congealed together. So apparently, it was the consistency of quickcrete when the human and the God rest their soul and the Acrocanthosaurus was walking on there. So
Hmm.
Acrocanthosaurus, yeah, that's the critter that was walking around. And but we have or not we they have digs along the riverbank a little bit upstream from the park on privately held land, and there are numerous footprints there. Now the thing is, I like I can be skeptical or anticipate skepticism from people. I mean, I believe that these are real in the museum. I mean, I'm not doubting their veracity. So I've been to multiple digs there, and so my thing was I would love to see one of these in a dig. And Hugh Owen said, this is back in 23. Ask Our Lady of Guadalupe to help out, and so I did, and we actually found about half a dozen footprints, most of which were just they looked like divots in the limestone. But then there was one that that was actually it looked like a human print. And so
A
if
human print.
a human print, and then this is dinosaur age rock, it's in the same strata. So there are two photographs there. One is pale, that's what the naked eye view, and then a friend of mine contrast enhanced it. So if your production manager could get those two out.
Is this what you're looking for?
Yeah, let's stop with that one. See, that's what we found. You have the little brush for scale. That's a left foot in this case. You can see the big toe and the four little ones. Now, the dig master who runs the museum, he said that's not enough to convince skeptics, and that's okay.
Yeah,
They
I
have a
don't I don't see it. I don't even see the toe or whatever you're talking about. I'm
okay.
missing some.
Well, I mean, if you go the contrast enhanced, you'll see. So the next picture will show you
A little
the
better.
dark. Yeah, where are we? Oh, it's
That
uploading.
work for you?
Yeah, see right there. You should be able to see the big toe now. So, um, so there you have it. I don't know if you're seeing a foot there or not, but you can see the heel at the bottom of the red oval, and you can see
Oh,
the
I see it. Okay, it took me a minute to get my eyes to work. All right, I got it.
yeah, and then that hole right above the circle in the upper right. That's actually a clam burrow. They're numerous out there. And essentially, what was going on is you had multiple sequences. If you look at it, you have very hard limestone like that. Um, Actually, it's kind of dolomitic. It's got some magnesium in it too. And then right underneath it, you have a mix of clay and limestone, marl, M-A-R-L, which would have been from that clay is bentonite from volcanic eruptions. And then you have another hard layer, another soft one. And you have prints in all of them. The soft one takes the prints a lot better, the marl, but they crumble when you expose them very quickly. But the harder limestone preserves them longer, but it's harder to make one because it's harder material. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock here because I want to make sure I don't go over time. We've got another
Oh,
20
that's
minutes.
fine. We have lots of time. It's up to you.
Okay. So basically that's evidence. Okay. Dinosaur age rocks, you have human footprints. How'd that happen? Okay. So obviously the whole paradigm, there's something wrong with it. Now, I'll add to this. It wasn't in my original list, so you can call it number 11A because it's dealing with dinosaurs. Dr. Mary Schweitzer, same spelling as Albert Schweitzer, the African doctor. Um, North Carolina State University. She went up to the Hell Creek Formation up in northeast Montana near Glendive, Glendive, and her boss told her to check out the dinosaurs there, the Tyrannosaurus bones, and he said they were rather stinky. So she went, she took a bunch, took them to the samples to the laboratory, started chemically washing away whatever so as to get better slides or whatever, and she found tissue. Tissue that was still, it wasn't replaced by minerals. It was actually tissue that was blood vessels, collagen, and blood cells. So all of a sudden you have that's an evidence also, and this would have been probably Cretaceous age rock there too, or at the earliest Jurassic, according to the evolution reckoning. So you have biological evidence there also that the not only human footprints with dinosaur ones, but you also have tissue in the dinosaur bones. This is about a thousand miles roughly to the northwest, but still same flood, I would say. Okay, and so you see the human footprints. Now, number 12, evidence for rapid coal formation. Okay, if you take plant material, put a little bit of clay in it, you need the clay, it acts like a catalyst, and then you heat and pressurize it, it'll turn very rapidly into coal. You don't have to wait millions of years or however long the latest theory has it. And a related thing is there's a problem, or at least it's being solved now, with slaughterhouse waste. Okay, you are a farmer, you kill 10,000 turkeys in your farm to sell to the supermarkets for Thanksgiving. What do you do with all the claws and the turkey heads? You can't really use them for soup or anything. So what they've done is they put these things, at least in some cases, into a pressurized vessel, a metal container, a large metal container like a tank. They heat and pressurize the heads and the claws, and after a short period of time, I forget, I think it's in the order of days or something. It's not a very long process. You cool it down, then you open up or drain the tank out. You have a layer of mineral-rich water on the bottom, which you
Oh
can
my.
use as a fertilizer, and then up top you have a layer of oil, which you can send to a refinery, and refine it for fuel. So conceivably, with that process, you can take that and if you had critters rapidly buried during the flood, if you have enough strata above them with a lot of pressure and the heat, you could easily turn them into oil deposits. So that's something to
Oh
think
my
about.
goodness. That's
So
fascinating.
okay, so number 10, 11, 12, sandcastle drainage holes, human footprints in dinosaur age rock, and also tissue in dinosaur bones, some dinosaur bones, and evidence for rapid coal formation. Number 13 now is evidence for rapid mineralization. You have springs all over the world which have calcium-rich water, and you can hang your little teddy bear on a string under the water, and after a short period of time, let's say weeks, he's hard as rock. So you can name him Rocky because he is now solidified. Okay, because the calcium gets deposited among the textile fibers and stuffing, and all of a sudden you have a bear that's solid.
Hmm.
Okay, so mineralization can be done very rapidly. And if you go to Turner Falls, this is just one example. Turner in Davis, Oklahoma, you have a waterfall there where the water comes out of a very calcium-rich set of strata, or stratum at least, and the waterfall looks like it's coming out of a giant water slide. It has so much calcium carbonate in it that when the water sloshes around in the channel, the carbon dioxide gets forced out, and then you have a tufa, a mineral being deposited on the sides. And so the waterfall, instead of eroding back like Niagara Falls, it's actually building out into it looks literally like a giant water slide, and it's worth looking up. When I give homework, I try to make it fun, by the way. And so you have that. So rapid mineralization. Okay, number 14. For this one, I need the Guy Berthaud pictures from your.
Let's see what those are. Hold on a second. Is that it?
That's it. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what Guy Berthaud did is he took sediment. Actually, if we could do the other picture first, that would illustrate it initially, and then he took mixed sediment particles, put them in a giant flume, which is just like a giant rainwater gutter with acrylic sides, clear plastic, and ran the water current with these particles. And he showed that the layering that you see there did not form with the black layers starting at the bottom and then the little stripy one and then the tilted one and then the other. It didn't deposit like that. It actually deposited horizontally across. So you had the black layer, okay, then you put another mixture of sediment. You have the black and white with the little black stripes, but mostly white, that went across. And then what you see above is the slanty ones. Those are cross beds. If you change the velocity of the water, it'll produce cross beds, which are often assumed to be sand dunes and desert and everything, but it can form in the water too. So like there's a group of strata in the Grand Canyon sequence where they assume it was a desert deposit, but no, water could have done that very easily. And then you have the other layers above that could have been one deposit. So if you go to the next of the diagram there, the other image, what you're going to see, right there, the oldest strata are actually upstream. So basically the whole layer cake is deposited horizontally across. So the Grand Canyon could have been deposited by a process like that, not with a bunch of little ones. You could have had a bunch of, let's say, half a dozen large currents piling up the rocks, piling up the sediment, and then when they dried out cemented, it became the solid stuff you see now. Now, the interesting thing about the Grand Canyon also is that pretty much all the strata, with maybe one or two exceptions, are all coming in. The particles indicate a current from the east. So that's an interesting data point there. Okay, so so number 13, evidence of rapid mineralization. 14 is Guy Berthaud. Now he's got God rest his soul. He was a Frenchman. He's died about a year ago, entered eternity. God rest his soul. But to spell his name, Guy, like Guy, and then Berthaud, Berthault. And if you didn't get that down on paper, that's okay, because his website has his name. It's still operational. You can do it in French or English, your choice, votre choix. Sedimentology. So sedimentology, one big word, .fr, like France. Sedimentology.fr. And he has videos. He's got those pictures of the images that I showed and whatnot. And yeah, his work is really valuable because he provides data that bolsters the paradigm, the additional paradigm. Now I'm introducing a paradigm here, that you can have deposition happening other than just from the bottom up. The bottom up can happen. Nobody's denying that, but you can have another alternate way of explaining, especially if you have a huge current. Okay, and then the last two are going to be without illustrations. Number 15, human and dinosaur bones deposited together. Human and dinosaur bones deposited together. Where you look for that is coastal South Carolina. It's a strip that runs roughly from Myrtle Beach down to Hilton Head Island, so the whole coast extends 20 miles inland, roughly, the formation. And what it has is you have the human and dinosaur bones mixed up in this formation. It's the Ladson Formation, LAD, like lad, young lad, son, Ladson Formation. And you look for the phosphate member, because every formation has members to it, substrata. And they're also known as the Ashley beds. Ashley, like the furniture store, I think it's called, and beds. Yeah. And they used to mine that area. You can look up the history of phosphate mining in that area around Charleston and up and down the coast, but mostly around Charleston, I think it was, inland. There's so many bones there that they basically burned them for phosphate fertilizer. But they did find hadrosaur bones and human bones. And so paleontologists who followed the old Earth paradigm, they're like, I don't know how they must have been washed in from different deposits and all that. I mean, they can't figure it out. I mean, I don't mean to mock them, because they're trying to do science based on the lights that they have. But ultimately, the simplest explanation, Occam's razor, you want the OCCAM apostrophe S, Occam's razor, named after William of Ockham. The simplest explanation usually is the one that's most accurate. Okay, the one that has the most covers the most bases for a particular scenario.
I'm getting a picture here, but go on. I'm wondering. I can't wait to hear the rest of this. Go
Okay,
on.
so you have the human and dino stuff deposited together.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot to mention something in number 14. I beg everybody's pardon. So I'm done with the 15, human and dino deposited together. I don't have a picture of that, but I am praying that I have a colleague that lives down in South Carolina that if Our Lady provides the funding and the wherewithal to buy land where this formation is, preferably on the creek bank, and just start digging and into that formation and looking and classifying what comes out. It'll be very tedious probably, but such it is. Jumping up to 14 again, I apologize. You have the layers. Look up polystrate, Polystrate, polystrate fossils. What you see there are trees that are petrified, and you have multiple strata around the trunk. So if they had been deposited slowly, that trunk would have decayed and been gone a long time ago. So obviously the strata and the trees were deposited all at once. So that's just to finish off 14. And then the last one of the evidence before we get into the theories is OOPARTS, OOPARTS. So parts with OO at the front. That means out of place artifacts. And you can look these up online, and of course you have to be careful to make sure that it's not fakery or AI or nonsense like that. But they have found a variety of objects in coal mines where you have like a brass bell with a little demon thing sitting on the top of the handle, or you have a metal ball with grooves on it, which obviously not man-made. Or you have, there was a place in a marble quarry outside of Philadelphia, suburban Philly, where they found Greek-looking lettering, like 2 letters on when the stone was taken apart. Or you have a cast iron bowl with 2 spouts in the coal deposit, or a gold chain. So I mean, stuff like that. So it's like, how did that happen? I mean, people breaking a lump of coal apart and finding these things. So obviously, the narrative, the old world narrative, just does not address this data. There's also people can look up the Nampa figurine, NAMPA, like Tampa, Florida, with an N, like Nancy in the front. Nampa figurine. It's a little bigger than a dime, but it's got a head, arms, and legs. And I don't think it has a face. I think it's either worn off or never had a face. But that was found when they were digging a well, drilling a well, actually. It's like 60 feet underground. I forget, somewhere in the Midwest. And they were just expelling the mud because it was mud and soil all the way down to the aquifer. And this thing came up with the mud. Okay, so I'm not saying it's from the Great Flood. It may have been from a subsequent flood afterwards, a local one. But the point is, these are data points that cannot be ignored. Okay, so having said all that, let's take a deep breath. Now we're going to switch gears and go into how the Great Flood could have happened. Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I don't want to go too far over because people get exhausted, and
That's very nice.
Including the speaker. So
I understand.
yeah, not that I'm tired yet, but I'm just saying. Okay, so there are 2 theories: catastrophic, 2 that are popular: catastrophic plate tectonics, or CPT, and hydroplate theory, HPT. Now, catastrophic plate tectonics, you look that up, you can find info about it. I haven't seen a comprehensive website about it, but essentially what it assumes is you had certain parts or areas of the earth where the crust became more dense than the mantle, and it started going down into the mantle, and the mantle overturned. So you had crust being driven very rapidly into the mantle, especially ocean crust, and the mantle overturning above the core, and then the hot mantle material coming up somewhere else. like along the mid-Atlantic ridge, and you would have had subduction, let's say, on the west coast of South America, let's say, just as an example. And so basically the subduction was very rapid. And what it did is it produced, the friction produced a lot of earthquakes, but a lot of tsunamis that would have been like every couple of minutes. They would have been hundreds of feet high. And they basically would have been cavitating the rock, shattering it, driving the critters inland, and essentially leaving a big pile of water until all the movement stopped and then the water ran off. But you would have had a big pile of water with sediment at the bottom, multiple layers sorted out by the currents, fossils, the whole 9 yards, the whole shooting match. And then on the rising side, like in the mid-Atlantic ridge, the heat from the rising hot mantle material would have evaporated the water right above it and produced so much evaporation you would have had torrential rain. Okay, so that's the catastrophic plate tectonics theory. The other one is actually, I would say, more comprehensive, and that's the one that I tend to look to. And I'm open to others, obviously, because the thing to keep in mind is that the Great Flood was primarily a supernatural event. It was God trying to save the souls of all these wicked people running all around the earth. And the only way that he could get their attention, other than Noah and his family, is to really literally turn their world upside down. And so they made him sit up and take notice, because if you look at First Peter, I think it's chapter 3, it talks about Christ coming, dying on the cross, his soul going down to preach to the spirits in prison who, while Noah was building his ark, etc. So these souls were not automatically damned. A lot of them were apparently in some kind of limbo, and then he preached to them. So obviously they had to make a choice. And so some of them, I would say, are in heaven, and the rest, who rejected him are damned. But they were not automatically all sent down, because God's merciful.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, go ahead. I like that idea.
So, but the thing is, with the hydroplate theory, you get more of an overturning even than the catastrophic plate tectonics. Essentially, what the hydroplate says is, from the fall of Adam and Eve until the flood, the earth had a granitic crust, the granite like you make headstones out of, and it was about roughly 60 miles thick, had some dirt and plants, a lot of plants on the surface with a little bit of water, half of what we have now, and a plethora of creatures. Not very many human beings, because by the flood time, people were murdering one another, and the book of Yasher talks about contraception. So people were not they were not procreating, and
Wow.
they were murdering one another. So you didn't have a huge population. And then if you look at, I think, the second book of Enoch, it says that God finally said basta when men were starting to marry other men and marrying animals. So at that point, things are totally haywire. And God basically said, okay, time to end this farce. But in any case, what happened was, under this crust, you had the basaltic interior of the earth. That's the black rock that you have like in Hawaii. And in between the two of them, you had roughly a mile of extremely hot water, which was very salty. And it was basically hot from the tidal effects of the sun and the moon. Kind of like if you take a frustration ball or a tennis ball and you squeeze it repeatedly, the temperature goes up. And so the water was absorbing that energy. And when the water was like at least pushing 800 to maybe 1200 degrees. And at that point, the water dissolves almost anything pretty rapidly. And so it was honeycombing up into the strata of, into the granite above it. And because it's so kind of not quite steam, not quite liquid, the stuff that it dissolved out would precipitate to the bottom of the chamber, because the water would form a brief droplet and then evaporate again, droplet, evaporate, droplet, evaporate. And so you developed a huge amount of essentially iron hydroxide, like rust, because there's a lot of that all over the place too. Limestone, dolomite, salt, gypsum, that was all accumulated on the bottom of these chambers. Now, if people hadn't sinned, the heat would have just naturally escaped up to the top of the Earth's surface, and everything would have been fine. But because of the sin, either somebody went digging too deep, or God basically sent angels over to rupture the earth. He developed a crack like a baseball seam all around the earth, and that water came blasting out hypersonic speeds, very hot coming up, but then when it reached the upper atmosphere, it was already room temperature, and it condensed, and you had torrential rain coming from that, which lasted for 4 days. It also, because the granite now was not supported, I mean, granite can only support its weight for 5 miles. 50, 60 mile ain't happening. So the stuff was crumbling into that water coming out, and the water was basically power blasting it into gravel, sand, flakes of mud, all that, and it was pulsing out because you essentially had a gargantuan water hammer where the sides of the crack were, because the crust was going up and down because of the water. And so what you had is you had the water going up into space, and you also had pulses of water, which had a lot of the crumbled rock and dead critters being sloshing to the sides onto the continent, and just accumulating up to a depth of almost 2 miles. I mean, we average 2 miles, actually. It's not up, almost up to 2 miles. And as the crack got wider and wider and wider, and more of the continents got submerged, not just with water, but with sediment, you ended up having a multi-100-mile wide Atlantic Ocean basin that wasn't there before. It used to be solid granite with forest or whatever on there.
Wow.
And what happened then is, with all that overburden gone, and you can see this in quarries too, the rock 60 miles beneath started rebounding upward by 50 something miles. Now, if you rebound that much up on the Atlantic side, what do you think is going to happen on the Pacific side? Well, it's all going to crumble and collapse. And the thing is, when you push something through a sphere or pull something, if you pull a small area on one side, you have over a big distance, you have a much bigger area on the other side collapsing over a smaller distance. And so what you had on the Pacific side is you had all that crust crumbling and collapsing down. Everything was already covered with water, by the way, and it collapsing down, but so much friction happening that you had a lot of melting, and you had a lot of basalt coming up. And that's why the Pacific floor is mostly basaltic. And because the whole interior of the earth was shifting, and that shifting caused friction, and that basalt melted and more voluminous than the crust. And that basically paved the Pacific floor. It's still got 2 million volcanoes. Not all of them are active, but you can still find roughly 2 million volcanic peaks under the ocean. And basically, you developed a depression on the Pacific side, a highland, not quite a highland, but an elevation on the Atlantic side. So what do the continents do? Well, I'll take the image of the ocean map.
Okay, now 1 second. There you go.
Okay, obviously, yeah, I can see it. Obviously, it's not a sphere, but if you look, and I deliberately had it tilted this angle. If you look at the mid-ocean ridge in the Atlantic, okay, you'll notice that if you consider the Pacific to be a lowland, all of a sudden, the North and South American continents would have slid toward the Pacific. Now, remember, they used to be on top of a lot of water. The water's almost emptied out. So now they're sliding. They're still lubricated by some water. But of course, like with every rock, there's irregularities. Like our Lord wrote about pillars holding up the land. And so you would have had irregularities under the granite. And so as it slid down toward the Pacific, it would have buckled. And that's where all these mountains are. You look at the Rockies, you look at the Andes, the Alaska range and everything. And so you would have had that happening. And also, you would have had something similar happening with the Himalayas, because Australia and India rotated up. Because the most obvious one is North and South America, but other parts of the world, they slid around too, not always in the same configuration as North and South America. So, I mean, the east coast of Australia has mountains. Eastern Russia, Far East has mountains. So obviously, all that put together. You had thrusting. And so what ended up happening, to wrap this up, while Noah was still floating on the ark above the water, he missed out on all that. I'm sure he wasn't lamenting that fact, but it
I'm
was
sure.
extremely violent. He's probably lamenting the souls that perished, but
Right.
not the rock. Um, but what happened is that eventually, if you had a snag, you had all the stuff hoisted up. So now all of a sudden, you had these very high continents piled with sediment, with mountains, and then you had the Atlantic going up to within about several miles of the present depth, and the Pacific getting deeper. All of a sudden, the floodwaters now had basins to run into, and so they started running off.
Yeah.
And when you have hundreds or thousands of feet of water leaving, it's going to do a major scouring job, and that's where you have all those planation surfaces.
Hmm.
And so that's what happened. And so you ended up having all these features, which I would have to go through a whole show to go through them in detail again in relation to the flood. But so that's basically what happened there. Now, at the end of things, when Noah and company settled on Ararat, and you notice Ararat is roughly, you see above the Arabian Peninsula, southwest of the Caspian Sea. You see the Black and Caspian Sea. You see the Caucasus Mountains. So right.
Okay. Is that where that? Are you talking about where there's an arrow up at the top of this graphic?
No, that's the Himalayas. But you go down, you see the Caspian Sea. That's the big blue body of water in the middle of
Okay,
Asia.
where that black circle is?
No, that's the Indian Ocean. No, you look at the land. You see that black arrow over the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Now you go a little bit down, you'll see a blue dot. That's the Aral Sea, and then you'll see a larger blotch of blue. That's the Caspian Sea.
Okay.
And then right at the south end of the Caspian Sea, and you have like a little mountain range, just a little bit below it. Just to the right of that, you have Mount Ararat. So that's where Noah and company would have settled. That's where the Ark would have settled, and the Russians actually found the Ark in right before the commies took over, and then the commies destroyed the evidence, but they have photographs and everything. But that's where people would have settled. But what happened at that point, because the oceans were so low and they were hot from all that grinding of the rock together, you would have had a lot of evaporation, and then you would have had an ice age forming because you had a tremendous amount of snow in these very cold highlands. And so you would have had the ice age happening within the first century or two of the flood. Babel would have happened right after that because Nimrod was Ham's grandson. And I'm getting a little static here. I hope it's not affecting things.
That's fine.
Okay. And then as the continents and everything adjusted, you would have had the continents going downward a little bit, and the ocean floor is rising. So the ice would have been melting. The rising oceans bottoms would have flooded the continents. So right after Babel, under Peleg, you would have had the dividing of the earth, where the land bridges were all now submerged. Okay, so but that's a topic for a whole episode.
Yeah,
all
I would
that.
think.
Yeah, and so Babel would have happened during the Ice Age, very soon after, and I could give you the years on another program. Okay, now just a couple of final items here to wrap up. 3 little items. One is, if you look at Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, like somebody who wears jeans, the son of jeans, Jeanson, son of Jean, he wrote a book called Traced. And what he does is he looks at the Y chromosomes of men and looks for, because that's what we men have, that determines our sex. He looked at the mutations. You get roughly three mutations in the Y chromosome per generation. So he traced actually all of humanity back to the 3 sons of Noah. And surprisingly, even though we Europeans, for the most part, are Japhethites, he found out that Eastern and Western Europeans, various ethnic groups, overwhelmingly the men are descended from Shem. The right son. And then but the book is fascinating. It's worth every penny of the $20 or $30 it costs. And again, buy it new because the author's alive. He's got a family to support and all that. But essentially, he found out that we're all descended from Noah. You can do a genetic mapping of if you assume a 4,500 year time scale from the present, roughly 2600 before Christ, you can trace everybody back to three male ancestors. So the mitochondrial DNA, which you get from the mothers, he said that's a lot more hazy and it's harder to do tracing with that. But with the Y chromosome, it's very simple. So that's one thing. Another one about giants, you see giant footprints in the museum in Texas. They were around at the time, and you do occasionally have people growing that big. You can look them up online, where people 10, 14 feet tall. So you can have some giantism. It's in the genetic code. But I would say the atmosphere now is so much thinner and colder than it was in the time before the flood, that just like people who grew up in World War II, they're relatively short, and then people my age who are fed, nutritional cereal, cereal and everything and vitamins, we're a lot taller than our parents because of nutrition. Well, same thing. If the atmosphere isn't conducive to a large size, you're not going to grow big. But all the prints that I've seen, both in the field, because there were half a dozen there, I just showed you the best one, but they're all normal sized. So probably what was going on, humans were normal sized there for the most part, but you had a contingent of much larger people walking around too. And
Can I
most
ask
of
a
them,
question?
sure.
Would Goliath have been one of those persons? I mean, he was
Oh
supposed to
yeah,
be a giant, correct?
oh yeah. I mean, we have multiple people. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Gilgamesh, who's also, it's another name. Gilgamesh is another name for Nimrod. I
Okay.
think he was up to a dozen feet, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you have examples. There are even modern ones, like in Afghanistan or whatnot. If you have the genetic propensity, if you have the right conditions or right nutrition or whatever, you can still carry it out. But I would say our atmosphere and even the magnetic field of the Earth is not sufficient now for giantism, because I mean you see a lot of fossils of mammals and turtles and whatnot that were a lot larger in the past during the flood era or right before, and you only have smaller versions now
Wow.
because
Fascinating.
and
Fascinating.
yeah, the museum is actually building a bariatric chamber. They want to simulate the what they think is the magnetic field of the pre-flood world and the atmospheric conditions, and then try it on plants and animals. If you look, University of Nebraska actually did a study on snake venom, and they found that if you zap it, they actually have a zapper you can buy that if you get bitten by a snake, you zap the wound, it unfolds the venom proteins and renders them mostly harmless. So you have time to get them out.
Wow. Fascinating.
And
Fascinating.
so the theory is, or the hypothesis, that during the time of pre-flood, the magnetic field of the Earth was so much greater that you couldn't form toxic venoms. So,
Okay,
yeah,
I know you're getting close to the end, but I have another question.
sure, sure.
Do meteorites have anything to do with any of this?
Meteor, what do you mean?
Like any meteors coming and hitting the Earth?
Oh, meteorites. I thought you were talking about media rights, as in like
No.
copyright. Now, meteorites, actually, I didn't address that, but and this is one reason why I embrace the hydroplay theory right now until something better comes up. Um, and keeping in mind that it was a supernatural event and we're only
Right.
investigating, natural aspects of it. But the hydroplay theory says that part of the blasting out of the crumbling parts of the granite that would have blasted stuff into space, and a lot of the metallic meteorites would have been actually the pillars supporting the granitic crust, because with all that interaction with the water, you would have had almost raw metal left behind, instead of granite, and so those crumbled along with the sides of the of the fissure, or not the fissure, the crack, and so as a result, they went into orbit, and they actually, that's why he says, essentially, God rest his soul too, Walter Brown. He was not a Catholic. Pray for his soul, please. A very decent man from what I read. But anyway, he said that, essentially, don't get excited about the organic material being brought in by meteors, because they're essentially, they just came from Earth, they're just coming back home. They're just orbiting around a bit, and
Right.
then they come back. And he even says, he speculates, and people are free to disagree. I'm focusing on the Earth-based aspects, but he thinks the asteroids also are material from the Great Flood that essentially coalesced through weak gravity, because asteroids are not. People think that they're solid bodies. They're actually very fluffy because they've
Hmm.
actually sent probes into them. Apparently, they're very fluffy, so it's very loosely conglomerated material. And so some of it's gone into orbit around the sun in the asteroid belt, and the rest of it's floating around everywhere, and then some of it's coming back to Earth. Because
Right.
he assumes that the Earth was one-tenth a bigger diameter. So the diameter will be 10% bigger, and the gravity, I think, will be 10% bigger too. And the volume would be, oh my goodness, you do the third power of 1.1. So 11 times 11 is, it would have had 20% more area. And I think it's, oh my goodness, like in the 60% something more volume. So there's a lot of material that the Earth could have ejected with this water.
Right. Right.
So we're in a shrunken condition. So yeah, one final point I wanted to make, and then I'll take questions also. I mean,
Well, the questions have to go in the comment area. So when we're finished,
I'm saying questions that you have.
oh, I'm done. I'm
Okay. Well, the final thing is, and I recommend obtaining this book. It's called Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy.
Oh boy.
Now, it turns out that pretty much all the peoples, all the way from southern Oregon down the west coast, all the way to Honduras in Central America, even though they had different linguistic groups and everything, and cultures, they all had a common prophecy of a man going up a hill, picking up paradise flowers while they're paradisical birds singing around him, and then putting them in his tilma, and then going down the hill to bring them to the leaders of his society to bring them happiness and himself. But then he wakes up, realizes it was a dream, and he wasn't worthy to go up to paradise. And so it's a very depressing prophecy, but it was sung all over. And what they also had in common was a four-petaled flower, each petal representing north, south, east, west, with the center representing an axis vertically up to paradise. So you find that in their cultures. And they had four pillars that, for pagan people, you don't think of that, but they believe that life after death, you have to be worthy to be entering paradise after death. That's the second pillar. The third one is goodness, truth, and beauty. Okay. And then the fourth one, the most important one, is that there's one overarching God that created and sustains everything. And all these lesser gods that they offer sacrifice to and everything, they're lesser. They didn't create the world. They're basically running things, but the main one's up high.
Mhm.
So when Our Lady appeared to Juan Diego, who, Blessed Juan Diego, who actually fulfilled that prophecy, she spoke in the terminology that all these Aztecs and all the related peoples and neighboring peoples could understand, because the Spaniards came in and they did a very intellectual approach, and these natives of various groups actually were thinking more in terms of imagery and song and poetry and everything. And so when Our Lady presented the truth in those terms, immediately 9 million of them became Catholic in the decade. But the priests were overwhelmed with work because they everybody. But I would recommend getting that book. It's by Joseph Gonzalez and his wife Monique.
And it is Guadalupe and the Flower
World Prophecy.
What's the matter with that sound? Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy.
Yeah. And,
okay, we can put that in the comment area.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to make a note here so I don't forget. Okay, so there's something else I was supposed to put in the notes. I forget now. Okay, so Guadalupe, Flower World. I forget.
We have lots of time.
Hopefully I'll remember. If not, just remind me if it comes to mind.
I will.
To you. Okay, and so, but the interesting thing is they have a map and a timeline, like page 40 something in the book, and they show you the Olmecs were the first one to settle Mexico about 2500 before Christ, which means they would have gotten there right after Babel. And they have those African style heads that all over the place there, which have African features. So obviously they must have had either contact with Africa or they were genetically African. And I think Dr. Jeanson does not have any DNA for them yet, because they disappeared pretty quickly. They were there 2,500 years, and then the Mayans came about 1,000 or 1,500 years later in a little bit south of them, and then to the east in the Yucatan, and they're still around actually. And then the Nahua people, Nahua, they're the ones that speak the same language that the Hopi Indians speak. And that includes the Aztec tribe. They all came down from Arizona down into the Valley of Mexico, and they were actually they did sacrifice, but not the industrial scale that the Aztecs did. The Aztecs actually had a wicked ruler in the 1400s. They all came down around the Middle Ages, but then so they came way late, but they had the same cultural ideas, but they had a wicked ruler in the 1400s that he conflated the god of war with the god of the sun, and basically said, you got to kill all these people to keep the sun going. Yeah. And then Montezuma, unfortunately, 60, 70 years later, he inherited that and system, but he became a Catholic. His family are still around. They're actually Spanish nobility.
Right, I remember that too from Landshurst.
But they spell it Moctezuma, M-O-C, but it's the same folks. Yeah. So essentially, so that kind of rounds things up. But I'm mentioning this last item because post-flood history is, I could do a whole show on that. Actually, there's a lot of intriguing data out there, including related to the flooding of the Great Pyramids. There's a Aztec-style city 2,000 feet under the water off the western tip of Cuba. There's a lot of weird stuff out there that nobody's really put together, and I would actually, I don't know the man personally. I don't know his real name. The Ethical Skeptic. He did a section. He did a post on the pyramids and how he provides data that they were actually underwater, except for the one that has that white cap on it. But the water in the Cairo area rose 500 something feet, and then went down like a bathtub, filling and empty. And there's no record, and there's no historical record of it. And so unless the record was destroyed, but something that big, you'd have multiple records of it. I suspect what happened was that people were away at Babel at the time, and this was pretty soon after the flood, so everything was still adjusting.
Okay, so, we have to wrap it up pretty soon. We're getting up to.
I'm actually finished now. So yeah, okay. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, hang on. I want to mention two things. I don't know. Are you familiar with a man by the name of Ken Van Hoof? No, obviously not. Okay. Well, just real quickly, he had an extensive website, and that's what I was going to ask you too. Do you have a website where you send people to?
Well, I don't really have a website per se. I have, and this is more fireside chat style. I have a Substack, Ademar Rakowsky, no capitals.
Okay, good.
.substack.com, and I cover great flood topics and what. Lately I've been traveling, so I'm doing stuff from Montana. I'll be doing Florida soon, and then Texas. And
good.
It's irregular postings, but it's meant to be sort of like lighthearted and entertaining. And the other thing is, if you have the Telegram app, the Colby Center has an English language channel created for God, and I do a weekly coffee break with Ademar there. It's usually 15 to 20 minutes. I try to keep it short. And lately I've been illustrating it a lot with pictures, and
good.
A lot of touristy pictures. You can see the airplane wing or whatever there. Because I encourage people, you do your observations concretely where you're at. You're out a car window, out an airplane window. Just observe and enjoy. And so,
yeah, indeed, I agree.
Those two. Oh, and the link for the Created for God is t.me, so t.me /Kolbe, capital KOLBE, capital CENTER.
Good. Okay, so I was going to tell you something about this Ken Van Hoof. He has had an extensive website full of research on all the stuff you're talking about, plus many, many other things. And he had used a picture from an Associated Press advertisement, and Associated Press got after him saying it was copyrighted. And so he had to take his website down. It'll be back up. But I think when the time comes, I want to send you his website, because he talks a lot about this same, has all information on this as you have just described to us.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that sometime. But anyway, Ademar, I mean, this has just been so different from anything we've presented before, and it's really quite fascinating. People just don't get into this, but I was thinking that this is a really good educational tool for young people who are taking chemistry and taking geology. They should have information like what you've just presented. So maybe we can get them to watch this interview or podcast.
Yeah, one thing I need to do regarding the photographs, some of them were taken by myself. The other ones I took from other sources. So I need to give credit where credit is due. So I'm going to post that in the comments section.
Okay, that's a good idea.
In writing, and that way, I don't want to offend the people that provided the material. Let me just see what I had. Yeah, the map is from Walt Brown's book. The other ones were Guy Berteau. That's from his website, so that would be permissible. And then the drainage holes are from some sisters in up in New Hampshire. They were traveling in Southern California, so that's by them. And then the Alvis Delk print, that's multiple sources, but it's the same thing. And I also have my own picture of it. And then the human footprints is my own. And then the historical flood thing I already said was from, I think, from Walt Brown's book. So
yeah, that's great.
Just to make it straight, it's fine.
Yeah,
but I want to keep you if we need to get going. If you want, I can finish with the Byzantine Hail Mary.
I think that's a marvelous idea.
Okay, name of the Father.
Hold on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking all this time. Your research is extensive and it's marvelous. And just good luck with everything you're doing. Keep it up. It's extremely interesting, and I'm very pleased that you contacted us and came to join us. So, all right, we will end with a good Hail Mary.
Okay, this is the Byzantine version. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail, Virgin Theotokos, Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. As you gave birth to Christ, the Savior and Redeemer of our souls. Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right, I said my Roman while you were doing that, so anybody can do that too. All right, God bless you. Keep up the good work, and thank you.
All right, glory to Jesus Christ, and God bless.
God bless you too.
Regina Caeli, laetare, alleluia, quia quemeruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit, sicut dixit, alleluia.